Namaste and welcome everyone. Today we are going to go over a tutorial on GitHub VS Code with Python. So introducing you to Arpit Kapoor, who is an incoming PhD student at UNSW. Arpit has been doing research with me in machine learning over the last few years and published some papers together, and he got offered a UNSW scholarship. Arpit, welcome, and you can begin.
Hi everyone. So I'll just start sharing my screen now.
Yep.
So this session I'll be talking about how we can manage like Python projects using Git and VS Code. Right. So these are some of the topics that I'll be going over today. Right? So there'll be three sections basically. In first section, I'll just go over VS Code, show how VS Code UI looks like, what extensions are and how you can install extensions, right? And then I'll just go over some basic steps of creating Git repositories, managing them, and how you can do Git source control from inside VS Code. And finally, I'll just show you one of my projects and how I'm using VS Code and Git in my current project, right? So I'll for the purpose of this demo, I have created a small repository in on GitHub. This is my GitHub account, and I've created a repository called VS Code demo, right? And this currently has just one file, which is a gitignore file. I have cloned this repository in my VS Code. I'll just open VS Code again. Like I've cloned this repository on my system, right? And I'll just open this. So this is what the VS Code UI looks like in the beginning, right? So when after installation, this is what you'll see, right? I have my VS Code already set up, so I might be skipping the setup steps, but uh, I'll just introduce what steps are required. Right? So I'll just open that repository. I have that cloned on in my desktop, so I'll just open that repository. Right? So this is the UI of VS Code once you've opened a repository or a folder structure in your VS Code editor, right? On the left-hand side, you should see a few tabs here, right? So these tabs are for different operations with your folder, whatever you like. For example, the first tab is Explorer. And within the Explorer, you should be able to see the files and the folder that you've opened, that I just now opened, right? And there's a universal search. So whatever, like whenever you're working on your code, if you have to search a keyword across the directory, like within, like across all the files, you can search that here, and you can also do replace operations, right? Then there's a git source control. This comes integrated with the VS Code UI, and I'll be talking more about this in a while. There's also a debugger that you can use with Python or any other programming language that you are working with. And finally, there's extensions, right? Using this extension, you can search any extension and install it on the VS Code. I currently, since I'll be working with Python, I have already installed Python extension, right? So I have installed this along with Python. I have also installed another extension called like for working with Jupyter. So I have the Jupyter extension installed over here if you want to work with Jupyter notebooks, right? And on the bottom part, you'll see a bar that basically acts like a UI for your extensions, active extensions. So for example, like the second tab over here shows the current working uh, branch of my repository. So GitHub already, so VS Code automatically detects the Git branch that you're working on, right? And then this is the synchronization button that syncs your local version of your code with the remote repository. And then there's a Python extension. So this is the current Python interpreter that I use, right? So I have created, I'll just move on to the programming aspect of it. So I have created a Python notebook, a Jupyter notebook over here. So this Jupyter note, I have created a dummy, like very small program over here, which uh, I'll be showing now. Right. So this is my notebook. So VS Code, with the Jupyter extension in VS Code, you can like open interactive notebooks within uh, VS Code UI, and you can edit them and run without going to a different user interface. For example, like when you run Jupyter on your machine, it will probably open in a web browser, right? And then you'll have to go to that web browser to access the Jupyter notebook. So this extension is a very convenient way of working with notebooks from inside your repository, right? So I have created a function over here, which is called say hello, which takes a string and it just prints out hello with that name, right? So I'll just, so before running this script, before running this code, generally in Jupyter notebooks, we have to attach to a kernel, right? But when we start Jupyter from our installed Python environment, it directly opens with that kernel inside, right? So for example, if you want to switch your Python version that you're connected to right now, uh, VS Code has like very easy way of doing that. So on the top right corner, you can see the Python kernel that it's actually connected to right now. So this is my Anaconda's base Anaconda environment that I'm currently connected to. But let's say I want to switch to a different Anaconda environment. So what I'll do is I just click on this. Let's say I have a dev environment. So this gives me a list of all the Python installations on this machine. So I can conveniently just switch to a different installation and then work on that, right? I'll just execute this cell and I'll run this. So yeah, this cell just asks the user for a name, and it'll just print that name. So I type my name, right? So it works. So my code is functional, right? So now that I've prototyped a function, I want to create a Python script out of it. Right. So to do that, what I can do is I can just click on this notebook. I can convert the notebook to a Python script, and VS Code does that for you. Right. So it has converted the program that I typed out in a Jupyter notebook into Python script. And I can just remove these unnecessary lines of code. Now, if I want to make it look more like a script, I'll just add a main. And I'll save it. So I'll give it hello.py. Now I think I'm ready with my script. I'll just save it. Now to run the script directly, so VS Code has this Python interpreter connection, right? When you install the Python extension in VS Code, it automatically adds the default Python environment to bottom left. If it's not selected, you can click on this icon over here, and it can change the environment, Python environment that you want to use. Right. So for my case, I want to continue with dev. I'll change to dev. Right. Now I will just click on this run button over here to run this file. So what VS Code does is it opens a terminal at the bottom of the screen, and it'll just run the file. So as you can see here, what it's done is it has taken my dev Python environment. This is the path to my dev environment, and it's executed this file. Right. So I just type right, and it's working. Right. I'm happy with this file. Right. So since I'm working with Git over here, I would like to commit this file. Like since the changes are pretty good, like it's working, I wanted to create a file that would print hello, and that it's working now. So I want to commit this file. That's it, right? So I can go to my Git extension. So this is the Git extension in VS Code. Right, so you can see all the active changes here. So under changes, there are two files mentioned here, which is hello.ipython and the hello.py. There are these two files that are currently have active changes. So to see what changes these files have, I can click on these files from here. Like let's say I want to see what changes were made in this, and Git automatically the extension shows you what changes you've done in this file, right? So for example, I've added these lines of code. So I'm happy with it. I'll just add this file. So when I click on this plus icon, it automatically stages the files. So staging is basically equivalent to your git add command that you would use if you're working with the terminal or git bash for that example, right? So I'll just add a commit message now. Since I've already staged these changes, I'll add a commit message. I'll say add hello. See, hello. Right. And using this check button with right tick, whatever you want to call it, I can commit the changes. Right. Now I have committed the changes, so I can just go to these options. So here you can see all the Git operations available, right? So it basically has all the Git operations that you want to do. You want to clone a repository, push, pull, whatever it is, you can do from here as well, right? So I'll just push these changes, right? So right now it hasn't asked me for my password because I have my GitHub connected with my VS Code. But generally, when you do it for the first time, it will ask you for a password. And once you log into your GitHub, from then onwards, it should be automatic. You shouldn't have to type in a password every time, right? So so there are other things that you can view in this tab as well. Right? If you look at the bottom uh, of the screen, there are other information that you can view within your Git repository. So for example, there's this commits option that you can see here. You can see all your previous commits that you've done. So for example, committed, I just made this commit, right? Add say hello method, and I can see what all the changes were in this commit, right? So that's also a very useful feature to have, right? And other than that, you can see what all repositories you have in current directory. For example, I have this VS Code demo repository. I have only one repository, which is VS Code demo, right? So this is the repository, and you can see what all branches are there, what all remote branches are there, local branches, commits, and tags, and other things like, for example, stashes, right? Another thing that I would like to show you guys is this. The main that you see here, this is the current branch. As I told you earlier, this is the current active branch that I'm working on. So when you click on this, you can actually see different branches that are there. You can connect to one of them, or you can switch to one of those branches, or you can create a new branch, right? For example, if I want to create a new branch, say dev, right? So I can click on this and it will create a new branch. Now you can see I am on dev. But let's not commit this. I'll just go back to main. Right. Yeah, so there are other options as well. Like you can see other information that you want. You can explore the file history. It just shows the history of any active changes that you have and the history of those files. For example, if I open hello.py here, I can, in the file history now, it shows the commit history for this particular file. Right, all the commits that included this file. So that's also a handy feature to have. Yeah. Then there are branches, remotes, etc. This is something that you guys can explore later, right? So next thing that I want to talk about is debugging Python code, right? So let's say I have a bug in my code that I want to debug, right? Let's say there I wanted an exclamation mark here. I have introduced a bug over here. I wanted an exclamation mark here, but it's not there. But when I run the script, it does not have any exclamation mark. I want to know why that is, where my code is failing, right? So in that case, one way to do this would be using print statements that many people do. But another way of doing this is that you can use a debug. So how you use a debugger is by like coming to the debugger tab, of course, and then you can either create a launch JSON file, which will create a default debugging script for you, default debugging configuration for this directory, or you can just do a run and debug. So run and debug will provide you some other options, but for now we are just working with Python file, so I can just select this Python file. And what it'll do is it'll run this Python file as it in debug, right? So what a debugger is, right? So it just ran that. So yeah, when you're debugging, let's say there's a concept of breakpoints when you're working with debugger, right? So you see red dots on your left here, right? Along with the numbers. So once let's say this is the line that I suspect has the bug, right? So what I can do is I can click on this red dot. It will create a breakpoint. Breakpoint is where your execution stops, halts between execution, right? So your code will run and it will come and stop over here, right? And you can validate different variables at that point, right? So I'll just do this, right? So I've added a breakpoint and I'll just run this. Add password. So what happens is, as you can see here, it did not print anything for me, right? So what happened is on this yellow line, the active line you see here, it has stopped the execution over here. And what we can do is, if I go to debug console, I can view different variables that currently exist in the memory. For example, even in the left-hand panel, you can see the current local and global variables. They are separated by local and global, right? So currently I have only one local variable, which is name, which has the value of it. I can also do that. I can print name over here and it will show me the value of Earth. So this is another good tool to have here, right? So yeah, and additionally, how you control this debugger is using these 4 buttons on the top, right? So the first button, what it does is it continues execution to the next breakpoint, right? So for example, if I have added another breakpoint after this, it'll go to that point. It'll continue execution to that point, right? And step over, it goes to the next step of the code, right? For now, we'll just talk about these 2 points over here, these 2 buttons, right? So I'll just do a step over. What it does is it goes to the next point. Since this was the last line of my code, it completed the execution, printed hello Earth, right? So I can see that there was some issue after this line, like something happened here. So once I have detected my issue, like it was in this line, I can basically, I know that there's a missing exclamation mark here. I can put in this, continue, and I run this. You see what happens now. Right, and here I'll do a continue, and right, it works, right? So that's the debugger in VS Code, right? And additionally, so additionally, there's one more thing that I want to talk about. I'll jump back to IPython notebooks. Additionally, a very nice feature that I like in the Jupyter notebooks inside VS Code is the variable explorer, right? So when you're working with Jupyter in VS Code, I'll just run this notebook again. What you see is that you see a variables tab over here. When you click on this, it opens a Jupyter variable explorer on the bottom. I think it's taking some time. There seems to be some, okay, that's okay. Right. So as you can see, all the active variables in my code are automatically added to the variable explorer here. Right. So I can click on this. So this is a normal variable. I can see the type of the variable, the size of the variable, the value as well. Right. Additionally, let's say if I have a, so I'll just stop here and ask, like, are you guys able to follow? Right. Does anyone have any questions so far?
All good, thanks. Continue. Anybody, any questions? Okay.
Right. So for example, a common thing that we all would be working with is pandas data frames, right? So for example, let me create a pandas data frame over here. I'll just import. I'll create a data frame. Let's say I'll create some dummy data over here. I'll create two columns. One and I'll add some values to it. So these are two columns in my data and they have some numeric values. I'll just create a pandas data. So what you'll see here is that as soon as I created the data frame, it is automatically added to my Jupyter, the variable explorer. And I can click on the data frame and I can visualize this in a very well organized like column and row format, right? And I can order it by any specific column that I want to. It has two columns that I created, C1 and C2. I can order by C1 or C2, whatever I like, and I can explore this data over there, right? So this is another useful feature that VS Code has, right? So this was like just a basic introduction to what all things that you can do in like the things that you can do in VS Code, how like it can optimize your workflow, right? So if you guys have any questions regarding any features, I can discuss them now, or like I'll just move on to another example. All good?
So I have a question. Sorry, why it's making so noise? Can you hear me, Arpit?
Yes, yes, Subhash.
So if you wanna display some kind of image with this, how can you do that without changing the windows? Can you do that?
Yeah. So for example, let's say I'll just create an image over it, right? Let's say you're working with a common image library in Python is the PIL library, right? Pillow. So I'll just import that, import image from here, right? And I'll just create a random image for now. Like mostly when you'll be working with images, you'll be working with them in NumPy arrays, right? So I'll just import NumPy as well. right? And I'll just create a random image, np.random. 0 to, the pixel should be between 0 to 255, and I'll just give it a, I'll just reshape it. So let's say I want to create a 256 by 256 shape image. I'll give it 3 channels. I'll just put it in. I'll just name it array, right? And I'll run the cell. Sorry. Oh my god. Okay. Right, so I have a image over here. This is a numpy array that I've created. I'll just create an image out of it. Let's just do it single check. And I will show. Okay. Right, so I think there's some issue right now. It's coming as all black with showing with a case. Okay, let me see what's the issue. Yeah, I think I might have, yeah, so here it is, right? Since I've created a random image, it's a random noise, but using Pillow, like it automatically converts the Pillow, like PIL images to visualize them within the set, right? So that answers your question, I guess, Ravi. Subhash?
Yeah, so every time you have to define the library before you import the image.
Come again?
So every time you'll have to import the library before you import the image.
Yeah, so Pillow is one of the Python libraries that, like, Pillow comes pre-installed with Python. Like, it is the default image processing library in Python, right? Image manipulation library in Python. So when you want to display, like how you would do with matplotlib, right? When you want to display a plot, you would import matplotlib, and then you will just create the plot and it will show by default, right, in Jupyter. Similarly, with images, you have to like import this image and create this image file, and you automatically show. Because if I just do ARR, just the array, it's just an numpy array. It doesn't know that it needs to be interpreted as an image, right? But when I do an image of the array, it knows that it's an image file, so it renders it in that.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Similarly, if you have to create plots as well, like, so this is the same Jupyter that you would normally use, right? So any magic functions that are available in Jupyter are available here as well. So for example, there's matplotlib inline that we might use pretty often to display plots inline, right? So what I can do is I'll import matplotlib first. Yeah, so I can add in this here. I'll just right, ATLT dot. I just plot a random line. I create an array. X equals to dot I go from 1 to 100. I'll just plot x with x squared. Right, so it automatically adds that over. Right. So by default it goes in line, but other magic functions will also work. For example, if I want to time it, there's a common uh, this one, now. Will show the time, right? So the point is that magic functions work.
All right, that's good. One more thing. So you said that you can directly convert the Python notebook to script, Python script. Can you do the other way around?
No, unfortunately, that's not supported here. I think. So for that purpose, you have to like create a new file. For example, create a new file, test.py, for example, and I'll just have to take my functions from here. Let's for example this and do it paste it. Like there's no other way of doing this. I think. Like at least I'm not aware of that. Right, if there is. Or another thing that you can do is just directly import the function.
All right. Okay.
For example, like from import. Okay. You can do this. Okay. So that's mostly this. Right. So any other thing that you would like to know, like Hakeem or anyone else? Right. All good?
No, yep.
All good.
Thank you.
So yeah, so I'll just move on to a more realistic example, right? This was just a dummy problem, and even the notebooks were pretty basic stuff as compared to what you guys you usually work with, right? So I'll just take an example of a machine learning project, right? So I currently have a project that I am working on. I'll share that with you. So this is the matrix LSTM project that we are currently working on, right? So here we are using an environment like a cyclone data that has like continuous tracks of cyclone, and what we are trying to do is we are trying to predict them using a matrix LSTM architecture, right? So this program has been written in PyTorch, right? So the model that I have created here, for example, this has been written in PyTorch, right? So a common thing that we do with deep learning is that we work with GPU training, right? We train neural networks on GPU quite often, right? So there's one thing that I haven't like touched on is Docker over here, right? You must be wondering what these two tabs are for. So this is Docker, right? So Docker creates portable environments for you. So I'll show you how we can use portable environments for deep learning in general, right? So what? So when we're working with GPUs, a common issue is that we have to configure GPU drivers and access to for for the Python libraries, right? For example, PyTorch uses CUDA. If you work with PyTorch, PyTorch has CUDA to run training on Jupyter, to run training on GPUs, right? So for example, I'll show that, right? So we use this command, right? So to move a model or data to a different device, which device in this case represents the GPU, we need to like move the data to that device, and for that PyTorch uses CUDA for that, right? But there's a common issue with CUDA is that for different frameworks, different CUDA versions are supported. For example, TensorFlow would support CUDA 10, and your PyTorch might support CUDA 11 or a different version, or maybe PyTorch supports CUDA 10 and TensorFlow supports CUDA 11. So a common thing that I do in my practice is that when I'm installing TensorFlow, for example, I just go to TensorFlow. When you're installing TensorFlow, okay, install, you'll see that TensorFlow has a support for Docker, right? So these Docker containers already contain configured TensorFlow to run on any GPU, on any NVIDIA GPU, right? So what I generally do is I generally clone these images, and I have an image cloned on my machine as well. So I'll just show Docker images is the command to list all the images. And as you can see, I have the TensorFlow image on my machine over here, right? Similarly, I have PyTorch image as well, right? So how Docker can be used to help with that environment inconsistency issue is that you can use you can run a Docker container, which is nothing but a TensorFlow environment where you can run your code in, right? It's like an operating system running inside an operating system, right? It's like in VM, right? So I have these two extensions. So Docker will show you all the current images and containers inside your system, like what all you have on your system. And you can, let's say I want to work on PyTorch, I can start this container that I already have of PyTorch. Right? I can start it. So it starts that image. And then using a remote container client that is available in extensions, I can connect to one of these containers, for example. Yeah, so it shows the dev containers here, or I can just add a container or attach to a container, right? So even on the bottom left corner, you can open a remote. This is the shortcut for remote window client, and you can just click on attach to running container and it lists the PyTorch container. I'll connect to it, and it opens my project there, right? It opens my project inside that container. Right? So now I am in a GPU enabled container within my machine, and I can just simply run this code. Right, so now as you can see, it's not my local machine, but it's the container. So I have some libraries that are not installed on this. I can just do a pip install to install these libraries. For example, so TensorBoard is missing. I can install TensorBoard. And I can try. Okay. So there's some missing files, which is why I can't run that. So that is another thing, right? So that is how I manage GPU training on like using VS Code, right? So that is mostly what I wanted to show you guys for now. So do you guys have any questions?
One more thing, Arpit. So if the Python script are dependent to each other, how can we run like in the same time?
Like how do you mean they're connected? Like how connected?
Like for example, the function. If the function are being called more than once, and then you are running the main script, and then there's a dependent script.
Yeah.
Can we do that in here?
So when you're running the script, it will run like if there are some dependencies that you have imported into the script that you're running, it will execute those functionalities, right? Like, are you asking if I'm running one script, will it run another script as well?
Yeah, that's right.
No, so you will have to run those scripts separately, right? Otherwise, if you're importing, let's say if you have a, okay, so let me like see if I get your point correctly. For example, in this case, I have a data set class that I have defined in the data.py, right? So this is a moving MNIST data set class that gives me the data, right? And for training the model, I need the data. So from data, I just import moving MNIST. Is this what you're talking about? Can you use components from another script into your new script?
That's right. Yes, you got it. Yes.
That is in Python, that is very easily possible. Like whenever you're working with multiple scripts, you can use the import command to directly import your components from a different script into your current script and create an instance. So for example, like I imported MNIST, moving MNIST class from data.py, right? I think in the name, I have instantiated, like I have created an object of this class over here, created an object, and then I like created a data loader with the class. So yeah, that is possible. So you can just import files, import components from a different file and just create.
All right. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions you have?
Okay, probably Hakim, you wanna show the how this VS Code is working in your Mac?
All right. Actually, I tried again just now, right? After looking at how Arpit did it, surprisingly, I don't have any errors, but I'll show you how it works.
Yeah.
Is it here? Oh, right. Here, right? This is the file. I work in R. And all right, let's no, but before this I was like the only thing that I wanted to do is to change the codes and then push and then pull, push, pull, and suddenly, so I was trying to do that just now. Let's say I do another comment and then she'll appear here, then I'll just test again, and then I'll just I should click here, right?
So that button, what it does is you see the cycle kind of button on the left, right? So this just syncs your remote repository with your local copy of that repository. So if there are some changes that you've made locally, it will push that. And if there are some changes that are available on remote repository that, let's say you're working with me and I have made some changes and pushed into the repository, if you click on that, it will pull those changes as well, right? It will pull my changes, or if you have any changes, it will push those changes. So it basically synchronizes with the remote repository.
All right. So every time then I'll have to click this one, right? There is no like shortcut. I mean, like
you can either click on that, or you can go to those three dots that you see on the top right corner, right? And you can click on push to push the code.
All right.
right? Whenever you have to like get the changes that I have made, for example, or someone else has made, you can do you can do a pull from here.
Oh, pull. All right, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Yep. 1 minute ago. It works, I guess.
Right.
I think that let's say I'm just this is just the same thing that I did before. Yeah, to show again that I can pull it.
Yeah, you can do changes from here, and you can just do
Link. And then I'll just pull. Yep, there it goes.
right. So
Thank you. Thank you. It works.
right. So additionally, I would also like to talk about one last thing.
All right, I'll stop. Stop. All right.
Right. So
Thank you, Alpit.
yeah, no worries. Okay. So one last thing that I would like to discuss with, would like to talk about is having a organized repository. Right? How do you organize a repository? Right. So there are like a couple of things that I would like to mention on that front. One thing is that it's a good practice to always add a gitignore file, right? So gitignore file is a git file in general that like whatever files or path you add in this gitignore file, Git knows that not to synchronize or commit these files to the remote repository. So for example, I have added /data/datasets. So anything inside this repository, I need to start with slash. Like if it's a proper absolute path inside the repository, I have to start with slash. Slash means this is the start of repository, right? And anything like any other folder name or path I've added, it will like directly ignore those keywords. Like wherever, if there's any folder named PyCache, it will ignore all the PyCache folders, right? For in this case. So yeah, so for example, I've added this data/datasets path. So if I go to that path, this contains my CSV files and TXT files, and even the NumPy files, which are like huge in size. And I do not want these to stay on my Git, right? I do not want to clutter my Git with these files, my repository with these files. So what I can do is I can just add these files to gitignore. And let's say, for example, I add another file. Like let's say I don't want to, I create a dummy file over here. Not in data. I create a new file. Test.txt. Right? And I type so if I go to my get source control, it will show that test.txt has some changes. So I can either choose to like not add this, I can choose to not add this. But another feature, like if I don't want to commit this file is, because what many people commonly do is like, for example, if you're using command line to commit your code, people have like generally many people like to use -a flag with git add, right? So git add basically stages your changes, and if you put -a, it will stage all the changes, like it will stage all of these, right? So if I want to avoid this at all costs, what I can do is I can go to my gitignore file. I can just put slash means that root of the directory, test.txt, and I save it. So now if I refresh it, you see that the test.txt is not shown here at all. So now if I do a git -add, and if I go to status, there's no test.txt, right? So gitignore is another Git feature that I think like uh, we can use to like avoid clutter inside the repositories, right? And aside from git ignore, another thing that I really would like to point out is instead of using one long script to do everything, it's a good practice to break down your scripts, like in generally a machine learning code, into multiple scripts. For example, what I've done here is this is an RNN model over here. What I've done is I've broken this down into 3 scripts. First script is my data script, which contains all the data related functions and classes, right? So it contains my dataset class, it contains my load functions, and mostly that, right? And secondly, I have created a model.py which contains my model architecture, which is a simple RNN I have created over here. And lastly, there's a training script that I've created that brings it all together. Right? It imports model and data from moving elements and just trains it, right? So what this modularity does is, for example, if someone else wants to extend my code, for example, if Hakeem wants to use my data set and he needs this data set file over here, he can just clone this file to his repository and just directly start working on it. Right? So having that modularity gives your code more readability, and it's just a good practice to do that with mostly with Git repositories, right? And managing machine learning code. So yeah, that's another thing that I wanted to speak. Right. Is there anything that you would like to?
Can you quickly show the way you were talking about, like how can we get away with the interference of Anaconda and the VS Code?
Right, interference, right? So I think it'll be, yeah. So in my case, I am using Linux. So the configuration on my machine might be different, but generally what you do is if you see this panel over here, the terminal panel, you can click on this plus button to add different terminals, right? So this option varies based on your operating system and what all shells you have installed. So for in the case of Windows, by default you'll see PowerShell or CMD over here, and you won't see the Anaconda PowerShell, right? And whenever you install Anaconda in Windows, it creates a new PowerShell which is specifically for Anaconda, right? So to add that to this VS Code, what you can do is you can go to configure terminal, right? And you see this Windows exec, right? Which terminal runs on Windows. What you do is instead of this cmd.exe file, what you can do is you can just copy your the path of your Anaconda PowerShell and paste it over here. Right? So
Alright.
instead of pointing to the cmd.exe,
Yeah.
you point to your Anaconda PowerShell. So your Anaconda PowerShell is actually a shortcut to the PowerShell with some additional parameters. So if you right click on your Anaconda PowerShell and you look at the command that it's actually calling, you can copy that command from there and paste it over here, right? And it will replace your terminal with that.
All right.
Right? Or additionally, you also have this JSON that you can edit. Right? So it again, that's a like UI. This is the UI and this is the JSON for that like configuration. Right? So even here, there's a small command that we need to like, just change, and that should work. If you have any like problem with that, if you need help with that, you can just reach out to me and we can just figure that out.
Sure. Thank you. It helps a lot. Thanks.
Subhash, it will be great if you could share your Windows version of VS Code. You can see how the PowerShell looks like.
Okay, let me try it. See, there has been VS Code is this. Yeah. Can you see it now? Yeah.
No, we don't see anything.
Uh, just check. Sorry. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So-
by default, I think you have your this thing over here. This is your CMD.
Yeah. As I said, like my IT manager, he fixed it. So
So if you click on that plus icon, you can go to the configuration and you can,
yeah, from here,
yeah, from the arrow, not the plus icon. Plus icon will open an.
uh, from here,
So,
PowerShell and command.
and you also have Ubuntu installed on your machine. So if you want to work on that, you can also use that.
Yep. So I'm using it to run the run my codes on NCI. So
Yeah, so having that is also a good option. And like
Yeah.
you can directly run your programs on Linux without actually going through any VM is what I'm trying to say, any virtual box, right? And this is quite efficient. I've used it in the past. I quite like that.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Use, Ubuntu, let's see what it does.
So what it does is so Windows now ships with WSL, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux. And using WSL, you can install Ubuntu directly on top of Windows without any UI of any sort. So basically, when you click on that Ubuntu, you will get a Ubuntu terminal inside of Windows.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I know that. But it's good that others know about it. So the terminal here is a PowerShell, and with
So it can be different. Like for Windows, default is CMD, and sometimes for some users they might have PowerShell. Subhash in this case has CMD. So what you can do is you can go to the configure terminal and change the terminal that you want.
Okay, yeah, that's good. So basically, the view looks of it is very similar in Windows and Mac, and most of the things are very similar or almost same, except that Windows the terminal is command prompt, whereas in Linux terminal.
Yeah, all the extensions will work regardless of which operating system you are on.
Yep.
So
Yep.
that's good with the VS Code extensions.
Okay. Yes. So this is very helpful. Thank you, Subhash and Hakeem, and many thanks to Arfit for your time and very detailed explanation. And this will be a go-to tutorial for our incoming PhD or research students who want to.
Sorry. Sorry, Rohit, before you end, I have a question. This is the very basic, very general question. When I was working in Python and R, I just want to compare between the two, and I want to find whether or not there is such a feature in here in Visual Studio. Let me share my screen.
Yeah.
Here. Normally, right, when I work in R, I like to run some lines of function separately. For example, I want to run this function separately, and then let's say, all right, I do this, and then there you go. Never mind. So is there any way that I can run certain lines in VS Code?
Yeah,
For example?
yes, there is. So there's a Python interpreter extension available in VS Code. let me, or maybe you can just.
Wait, all right. Okay, cool.
So I know that it exists for Python. There should be one for R as well. So
Yeah.
For example, if I want to run a set of lines, I'll just open a simpler repository. I'll open the demo code. You can select these lines. And let's shift enter. Yeah. So you see that what happens is that it opens a Python interpreter at the bottom. What I did was I selected these lines and I pressed shift enter.
Shift
So
enter.
Yeah. So what happened? So I have configured it for Python. I'm sure there should be one for R as well.
Okay.
So I selected it and I pressed shift enter and it just typed that out in a terminal. Right. So now if I want to just, call, let's say, right.
All
So,
right. All right.
so if I, let's say, if I add x equals to 2, right?
Mhm.
Select it, enter, it's there, right? And then I can
Okay.
that is. So there's a better version of this as well. I think there's some extension that does it. I think it should be there for R as well. I think R extension should do it on its own.
Okay. Okay, I'll
I'm
try.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure about the how you do it with R. But like I'm pretty sure the
Very,
extension.
very. Yeah.
You just need to find the right extension.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, many thanks, Arpit, and thanks, Hakim and Subhash, for your comments. And yes, you all have a nice weekend.
Same to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Arpit. Thank you. Thank you, Rohit. Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.